Hello everyone, it's Sylvia from Feel Like Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at my favorite healing decks. So this video was inspired by a video that I watched by Gerald at the Tarot Stash together with Lisa Papez and Jamie. And it was called Laugh and Learn Healing Decks. And during this video, they actually came to talk about some incredibly important topics. I was really impressed by everything that was discussed because on the one hand, there was a lot of laughter, there was a lot of lightness, but they were talking about, and they were especially touching on some very powerful topics, very powerful arguments. And I think that it is something that is so important that I would like this to become a VR. And I would like other people to actually contribute to these list of decks that we all consider healing, or at least today I'm going to show you what I consider my healing decks. A few of the decks that were presented in that video, and I will make sure to put the link to that video in the description box below if you want to check it out if you haven't already. But I would really love to give the opportunity to look at different decks because the ones Gerald, Lisa, and Jamie talked about were very beautiful decks, very powerful decks. But I believe that we have some kind of a mission when we are tarot readers, tarot collectors, when we use tarot in our own practice for self-growth, self-acceptance, when we use it for meditation. We kind of have a mission to spread the word to others, to tell them whenever we find a deck that we find particularly important in our journey, we really want to tell others because perhaps someone else is going through the same stuff that we are going through. And that's why I kind of spread out this invitation and ask others to join in and show the community what your healing decks are. So the first deck that I want to show you is this one, and I think it's old enough to be called an older deck, and many of us have actually started reading with this deck, or we have acquired this deck in the early days when it was first published. This is a really old deck in my collection. I didn't buy it until probably the early 2000s. I don't necessarily remember. But as you can see, the edges are a bit frayed. And this is one of my 2 copies. I actually have 3 copies, but 2 in the full size, and then I have a smaller one, the pocket size. This is the Osho Zen Tarot. The reason why I want to start with this deck is because I'm going to try today, I really hope that it turns out to be okay, but I want to try and give you a number of decks that will show you some kind of a path towards redemption. And it's going to become more clear when I'm going to talk about the decks. But why a path towards redemption? Because every journey that focuses on healing necessarily takes us to a level of redemption. And whether we're redeeming ourselves from something we believe we're guilty of, whether it's something that we're guilty towards ourselves or towards others, doesn't necessarily matter. But it's always a movement. It's always a movement that goes from one situation in which we feel trapped, like this kid, to a situation in which we actually push through. We realize that this lock, and let me just zoom in because this is a very important point. We go through the stages in which we feel like we're missing out on something. Like this kid, for example, is looking outside of these bars, and it's a gated door, obviously, but the bars are wide enough that it can actually peek through and see that there's a rainbow on the other side of this gate. So we can imagine that perhaps he's trapped inside, or he's also trapped outside, because as a matter of fact, this is in the deck, the Osho Zen Tarot. This is the 5 of Pentacles or 5 of Coins. Obviously, the suits have been renamed, and there's also keywords that are not necessarily the first keyword we would think of when we look at a certain card. The outsider. So what is the concept of the outsider, and why do I believe that is actually strongly connected to that sense of healing that we as tarot reader really give to some of our decks? when we believe that for some reason we stand between a barrier and happiness, we are always the ones that tend to look at things in a different way. So this kid is actually looking outside, they're seeing this rainbow. Perhaps there's some of his friends playing and he wants to join them, and you can tell that because so I have to put the cards really close to the lens. So as you can see, it's actually clutching at the bars and also the chain of this gated door, of this gate. And there is such a strong sense of longing. There is such a strong sense of wish. It's a desire to get outside, to escape out of this cage. We don't know whether it's a desire to go inside a place or to get outside of a place. But what we do know is that this is really relatable. This card, I'm sure, has resonated for so many of us because it is impossible not to find ourselves in this exact same situation at least one time in our life. Now, I want to draw your attention to the fact that this lock, that is, the whole thing is really pivots around this lock, and this lock is actually not closed, it's not locked. So it is open. Let me see if I can show you, but I don't know if I can actually focus. So this is an open lock. So this kid is so consumed by his desire to join the rainbow, and therefore we can imagine happiness or freedom, that he puts all of his effort into looking outside, and perhaps he's even banging at the bars of this gate. Perhaps he's even shouting out. Perhaps he's even asking for help. Or perhaps he's just standing there, perhaps crying, perhaps longing to go outside. That all of his focus, all of his concentration is actually distracted. And he doesn't even realize that the lock is actually open. So it's not difficult. It just takes one moment of probably taking one step back and looking at the bigger picture and realizing that the lock is open, that he can actually remove the chain and open this door or this gate. I believe this is a very powerful metaphor for many of us. We are so consumed by the desire of living in someone else's situation, or living perhaps somehow outside of our own situation. If we believe that we live in a cage, we have been trapped by something, that we don't realize that we can actually get out anytime we want, if we only just had the courage to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Sometimes this cage is a cage of our own making, and as such, it's probably one of the biggest cages of our lifetime and the most difficult ones to tackle and to break free from, but also the easiest one. It's just that as long as we focus all our attention on the wrong thing and we use all of our energies in the wrong way, we will never be free. We will never even realize that we can be free if we want to be. So this is a very interesting concept, and I have to say I want to start with this deck and I want to start with this card because this is one of the most powerful cards, and I'm doing a very powerful work with my Starlight members. So I have a membership program. We started back in December. We are helping each other out, and we're just literally we're on the same boat, we're doing the same journey. We are kind of looking at what's around us. We're trying to assess what this cage is made of, who's beside ourselves in this cage and sharing this cage with us, and so many other things. And sometimes it's a very powerful work, sometimes it's very also painful, because obviously it brings with it the necessary acknowledgement that sometimes we're just doing the wrong thing over and over again. And this ties back to some kind of work that we call healing the inner child wound. So when we talk about an inner child wound, this image comes to mind because there is a trauma developing under our own eyes. We want to join the happiness of the rainbow and perhaps our friends playing without us, but we are painfully convincing ourselves that we cannot. We cannot escape this cage. So when we try and do some work for healing the child wound, the inner child wound that we went through, we're literally teaching ourselves not to fall into the same patterns over and over again. It is, believe me, one of the most difficult things you'll ever have to do, but it also is one of the most essential and important ones. So, going through the other cards in this deck, you will understand why I have chosen this deck as my deck number 1, which is I relied on this deck to show me where my wounds are. Whenever I do pulls from this deck, I, generally speaking, get the right cards from the start, but sometimes I just go through the cards myself and I stop when I see one of the cards that most relate to me or resonates for me at that specific moment in time. It could be the Eight of Swords with the Guild card, which is very, very powerful as well. Or it could be the Three of Swords with the Isolation card. Or it could be the Five of Water with the clinging to the past. Nine of Water with the laziness, because that is something that sometimes we actually face when we reach that level, when we think that everything is actually going fine, but deep down, or maybe deep down, we actually feel that something is wrong, but we just don't want to face it, and then we push it away. And we are alone in doing that. Or the Seven of Fire, Seven of Wands, in which we are so busy just trying to stick up for ourselves and sticking to our own guns that we don't realize that there's someone else who's actually going to blow the balloon, to break the balloon. And so when the balloon is going to explode, everything that we're trying to juggle with all our hands and all our legs is miserably going to fall down. Or the Schizophrenia card, and I believe that this is one of the most triggering card in this deck because it is not just a powerful card, but because of the keyword that has been assigned to the card itself. So schizophrenia is an incredibly painful mental health condition, and I can assure you 100% that it needs to be cured by professionals. So as such, I don't necessarily think that it belongs to that work that we're doing, for example, with our members. When someone actually suffers from schizophrenia, they necessarily need professional help. But if we step aside from the clinical definition of schizophrenia, this is always pointing to that sense of being in two minds, of being stuck between two really sharp edges, and just being at the last moment in which we decide whether we still want to power through and perhaps pull ourselves up, or we just want to let go. The problem is that even if we wanted to pull ourselves up, we have to let go of either one of the two grip that we have. Or the postponement card, because when we face this kind of rest, this kind of non-movement, which is necessary perhaps at a certain point of our lives, we're actually postponing, trying to get out and see the colors. Or the suppression card in the Ten of Wands or Ten of Fire, in which we have been so overburdening ourselves with not just our own trouble and issues, but somebody else's as well, to the point that we can actually no longer make our way through these kind of issues. We are stuck because the weight of the ropes is just way over what we can actually lift. Or the exhaustion card, which is just before the suppression card, or the comparison card, which is terrible because this is the Five of Swords. And to me, one of the many keywords that I do associate with the Five of Swords is gaslighting. Gaslighting is part of comparison. Why do we always have to compare ourselves to others, to the success of others? Perhaps others are successful in areas we're not even interested in being successful. So why this comparison, and why do we let this weigh us down? The burden that comes after the comparison, that tells us that we absolutely need to move, because there is this sense of being anxious about things being as they are. And so we always feel like we need to push ourselves and go through with that. And really embark upon that journey that we're not necessarily happy about doing, because it will lead us to a better place, to a better shore. And the sorrow that comes after as well. Or the miser with the Four of Pentacles, the miser that is in an even bigger cage, if I may say, because there is no bigger cage of your riches, and riches could be metaphorical, it could be also literal. And the politics, which is an awful, awful card. It's the Seven of Swords as well. Or the morality card, the control card, the mind card, which is really intense and very powerful and also kind of triggering. Or the fighting, or the conditioning card, which is related to the devil, for example. So this deck, as you can imagine, and I intentionally pulled these cards out, or I put them first, because I really wanted to talk about these topics. And I believe that we really need to start by confronting these cards and let ourselves be triggered sometimes in a safe environment, in a safe space, completely devoid of bias and judgment. Because we need to feel like we can actually share these things with someone else that may possibly be at the same stage of our journey. And so by sharing, we actually not just care for each other and for ourselves, but we actually create those meaningful connections that are extremely important for us in order to be able to go along and go down that journey and arrive to the realization that if we only take a step back and we look at the bigger picture and we look at that lock that we believe being closed and preventing us from opening that gate, we may just realize that we can go through it. So this is an incredibly powerful deck for me. It has been used many, many times, as I was saying before, to the point that I had to buy another one. And I also splurged for the mini because I just love reading with this deck. And generally speaking, I use this deck when I get questions, you know, that talk about anxiety, that talk about, that express, even though in different ways, the concept of feeling trapped, of feeling like we live in this cage that is made, perhaps sometimes, you know, it is of our own making, or sometimes it is a necessary cage, because we live in different stages of our lives. And obviously there are moments in which we create walls around ourselves because we need to protect ourselves, because we believe, and it is true, that outside is actually not safe. So we need to reach the level of confidence in which we understand that we are safe because we can produce safety. We can make our own safety. And that will be the time in which we will finally be able to get outside. So this was the first deck. And let's move on, because I really believe that this is going to be a powerful video. There might be some really strong thematic, and I hope that it's okay for everyone. If there's some triggering cards, I will definitely give you a warning, because I strongly believe that we need to be always pledging for safety. But I also believe that sometimes we really need to face these kind of topics. One of the questions that came up during the video by the Tarot Stash was, what does healing mean to you? And I believe that we actually kind of looked at this while we were looking at the deck, at the Osho Zen Tarot. So healing substantially means going back to that trauma that constituted the very first wound that our own inner child suffered from, and recognize what the elements of that wound were with the eyes of our adult self. This is extremely important, because if we keep on looking at that wound the same way we were looking at it when we were 5-year-old, and I'm just saying 5, but it could be 10, it could be 3, so it's just a number. If we keep on using the 5-year-old eyes to look at that wound, we will never get out of that. We need to use our adult eyes without judgment. That's extremely important too. But also with the maturity that comes with the experiences, and also the realization that we are not alone. We are part of a community, and we can definitely get out of those walls or that cage when we feel ready to. So healing, that is healing for me. That is healing the inner child wound. So using your adult eyes to look at what happened to that child, and in a completely safe environment, bias-free, judgment-free, and recognize what the elements at play were, and try and understand why these elements keep on coming up to the surface in our adult life. Once we identify those patterns, it's not easy to get out of them, absolutely not. But at that point, when we do recognize that, we would have done that thanks to the help of your community, and we will feel confident that we can start doing something about it. So I also wanted to show you another deck that is extremely important for me, and this is the Slow Tarot. This is by Lacey Bryant. Is an incredibly beautiful deck, but it's also very modern. And the reason why I wanted to show you this deck is because there is one card in this deck, and I'm just showing you all the cards because I'm just going to go through all of them until I find it. But there is one card that really makes me emotional every time I see it. And it's the Star card. And I just want to zoom in and I want to show it to you properly because I think that it's one of the most powerful Star cards that I've ever seen in my entire collection. And it's also, because of that, it's also probably my favorite. So this is the Star card. What do we see in this card and why do I relate this as a really powerful healing card? First of all, we see this character. So this character is wearing a white tunic. As we can see, we can assume that they're standing on a boat because there is water all around this person. And there is some water also coming in because there is a bucket here. Don't know if you can see, but there's a bucket here that is actually collecting water, and there's water also on the floor. Now, this person, though, even though they are surrounded by really choppy, stormy waters, also scary waters, because we can see, for example, another boat, another ship that is on the horizon, and we see how dire the situation is. This person is almost unperturbed, and they're just looking and using this instrument that is actually called a sextant. And a sextant is an instrument that, with the help of a map, looks at the position of the stars in the sky and can actually tell you your position on the map. It's an instrument that was used before we have all our technology nowadays, but it was used for navigating in the times, indeed, when we still did not have all of the technology that it's used nowadays. And it is an instrument, though, that cannot be used all the time. That's the main problem. It needs to be used at night, and it needs to be used in a night in which the stars are actually present. So you need to have access to the starry night, because without the stars, it's practically useless. It is incredible to notice that there's a few elements in this card that bring a message of hope. And that hope is the strongest healing element of this card itself. We do, first of all, see that there's a seagull here. Now, a seagull is always taken as a symbol that land may not be far away, because even though they can actually survive for many, many hours at sea, they still need to go back to land in order to feed themselves, also to calmer waters in order to rest. So seagulls are always welcome. If you read any kind of pirate books, for example, you'll be used to recognize this symbol of hope because it indicates that land is not far away. Another element of hope, I strongly believe, is the fact that we see a very luminous star in the sky, even though it is still surrounded by storm clouds. So what this card is telling us is that healing starts the very first moment in which you spot a star, the very first moment in which you spot a seagull. You're still gaining water because there's still water here, and the bucket is full, and there's water coming in, and the sea is really choppy still. So it still looks and feels like a really dangerous and dire situation. However, there is a sense of peace coming out of this person because the stars are out. And so what they're doing right now is making sure that they understand what their position is in the map. This is the very essence of healing, and I love that it is related to the star card, because one of the major keywords that I do associate with the star is indeed healing. Another deck that I wanted to show you today is the Modern Nirvana Oracle by Jennifer Sodini. It's a 50-card oracle deck with a guidebook, and I strongly believe that this is an incredibly powerful deck. And I was watching the video I was telling you about by the Tarot Stash, and I was thinking about this deck. And at a certain point, I think it was Jamie, and she actually mentioned the concept of kintsugi. Now, kintsugi, if you're not familiar with it, it's the Japanese way of putting back together a number of broken pieces in using mostly gold powder, but sometimes also silver powder. But in a way that looks completely new and even more powerful than before. Now, let me just, oh, maybe I don't need to zoom in, but just a little. So this is the kintsugi card in this deck. And the reason why I wanted to show you this is because it's very, very important to me as a card and as a concept. I have a passion for Japan. We just completed the deck study of the Yokai Yoshitaro with my Sunlight and Starlight members, and we had a lot of fun in recognizing all of the yokai characters in the Japan supernatural lore. But it's also related to the fact that there's always that sense of something that grows out of the ashes of something that has been broken. So are we broken? The concept of the kintsugi is necessarily related and linked to the concept of being broken. I have to say something, and I hope this might be a little bit triggering, so I just warn you, so perhaps maybe skip ahead of 5 minutes. But to me, there is a strong sense of power in admitting that we are broken, accepting that we are broken, because it's only when we do accept that we are broken, that we have been broken, that we can start healing ourselves. There are different ways to look at this, and obviously there is a lot of people that sustain that you need a positive mind attitude, and I'm all for it. However, I do recognize that sometimes we actually gain a lot from admitting and accepting our broken selves. It's only when we accept our broken selves that we stop being broken. What is different in ourselves that we keep on noticing it needs to be acknowledged. It's something that makes us feel different from others. Once we acknowledge that and we identify that and we accept it for what is, and we release it, that's the moment in which we will not feel different anymore. We will feel like we belong. But if we keep on, let's say, concentrating on denying that is actually very, very tricky. It is a very tricky concept. And with this, I don't mean to say that a positive mind attitude is wrong. Absolutely not. Please understand that it is not my intention. However, my way of looking at things, in many, many cases, I had to tell myself that I was okay with being broken. Had I not felt okay with being broken, I would have pushed myself denying that forever. Kintsugi is an incredibly beautiful concept. It tells us that once we are broken, we can actually put ourselves back together, and the end result is going to be even more beautiful. Why? Because these are the scars that tell the world and ourselves that we have been through something, we have survived, and we're ready to move on. I think that this deck, and not just the kintsugi card, but many, probably all of these cards, are very, very powerful, as I was saying. But it's also one of those decks that, because it is aesthetically very beautiful and very significant, very poignant, there's so many cards in here that are very emotional. I really believe that it's one of those decks that need to be part of your collection if you have a powerful intention to heal yourself and to actually manifest that kind of healing through meditation and through this journey that you're taking and you're embarking upon. So the breath card is very strong as well. Know thyself is very important, and partnership, because let me tell you, we cannot heal. It is very difficult to heal by ourselves. We definitely need somebody else's help. And I'm a strong believer in the concept of asking for help. This is incredibly important for me ever since there is an anecdote, but I just want to say this. I remember doing some scuba diving classes, and one thing that my instructor kept on repeating over and over and over again was to make sure that we knew how to attract somebody else's attention. So first of all, you cannot dive by yourself, at least not the first times, but generally speaking, it is advised to always have a buddy. But in any case, it may so happen that maybe your body is distracted because, let's face it, there's some really beautiful treasures under the sea. So you need to be aware at all times of where your partner is. And if something happens to you, there's a number of symbols, gestures, that you can do with your hands in order to attract the other person's attention and communicate instantly the sense of urgency that something has happened to you, and perhaps you need help, perhaps you need to go back to the surface, and so on and so forth. Partnership is extremely important. Always, one thing that is also very important, just as much as partnership, is choose your allies very well. Be always aware of who's on your side, because they might not necessarily look like they're on your side, but when they are, you have some powerful and strong friends. Rebirth, harmony, friction. That's a really beautiful card as well. Transcendence. That's actually very important when we talk with our Starlight members, when we talk about transcendence, when we talk about escaping the cage, when we talk about liberating ourselves. It's always about starting from one state of mind and then gradually moving into the next state of mind. Liberation is also part of that. Awareness is incredibly important. And this card is all, if I wanted to show you one card to signify that kind of feeling, that kind of sentiment, is this one. So what do we see in this card? This card is called boat. There's a keyword, it's called boat. And indeed, there is a character that is actually standing on a boat. It doesn't look like a very sturdy one, to be honest, and the waters are also choppy. And on top of everything, there's a, I don't know, sometimes through the lens you can't really see, but you'll have to believe me, there is a cloud here, not just an eclipse of the sun, so it's also dark, but there's also a cloud, and it's raining just on top of this person. It's literally raining just on top of this person. So not only you're on your own, you're on a very flimsy looking boat in the middle of the ocean, perhaps with a choppy and stormy water, and you're in a dire situation, you're in a dangerous situation, but on top of everything, to add insult to the injury, it's only raining on top of you, and it's a very flimsy cloud, but it's still raining, and the sun is gone, so you don't even have the light of the sun to console you, and yet you still stand. Isn't it just amazing? There's a few sigil-related cards in this deck as well. Sometimes I don't read with them, and then I like to take them out of the deck. Sometimes I leave them there, and I use them intuitively. It really depends. Masks, a very, very strong card. Prism, connection, and perception, and so on. This is a really powerful deck. I really, really appreciate the work that it lets me do in my journey to healing. So one of the first things we need to talk about when we do try and heal our inner child wound and ourselves is acceptance. We need to accept, and I was saying before when I was talking about the concept of kintsugi, so accepting that we're broken in order to be able to finally look forward to being one again. The Savvy Soul Tarot by Julie Whitelish, this is one of my favorite decks when it comes to accepting the situation. So this deck is very modern, and I am sorry to say, by the way, it was a Kickstarter. There has been no reprint after that, and I think that Julie has actually run out of the copies, so it might be difficult to find it. However, there are a lot of other decks. This is very significant for me. But there might be other decks out there that are very modern and they resonate with you, and by no means should you stick to only one deck. You know, this comes from a person that has over 500 decks, so, you know, I cannot preach to have only a few decks, obviously. So if you feel that you need to reach out for 3, 4, 40 decks, by all means do so. They need to be resonating with you. They need to talk to you. It needs to be almost as if you were that inner child, that child again, that 5-year-old again. And you need to read the stories, or someone is going to read you stories at night in order for you to get to the state of mind of being relaxed and fall asleep. It needs to feel safe. This deck does all that for me and more. It looks almost as if it was based on my life, not necessarily because I have found myself building a dam, like in this case, but I kind of resonate with everything that is happening in this deck. I recognize all of these cards. I recognize the situations. I recognize the characters. I recognize the, obviously, well, it's easy when it comes to the titles of the cards because there's not a lot of renamings, if any. But there are sentences at the bottom of the deck that actually really, really help also connect with the cards. And this is one of the things that I actually do when I'm trying to bond with a new deck. I really observe the cards. I observe whenever there are sentences, messages, I always make a point to read them. I always read the guidebook, for example, because I truly believe in understanding what the concept, what the motivation of the creator was when they created this specific deck and choosing these specific images. So this deck, as I was saying, it's everything for me. It's really talking to me, and it feels like it's just talking to me. Obviously, it's not. There's a few people that like this deck. But I like to tell myself that it came to me, and it was a funny story. So someone was advertising about a Kickstarter on a Facebook page that I'm a member of. And, you know, I checked it out, and I looked at it, and I didn't really like a deck. And I was like, oh, I really feel like, you know, having a look at other decks. And so I scrolled down, and sometimes, depending whether you're using your phone or your desktop, when you're looking at one specific Kickstarter campaign, the algorithm will understand what you're looking for. So they will put out, for example, tarot deck, and that will just show you other tarot deck campaigns that are funding at that moment on Kickstarter. And so I saw this one, and I saw the Three of Wands, and I don't know whether I already passed it or not. But the Three of Wands spoke to me right there and then, and it told me that this deck is absolutely made for me. And I had to, and I didn't even look at other cards. I think there were on the main page, there was a Three of Wands and perhaps another couple of cards. I didn't even go further than that. I didn't care. I didn't even care about the price. I knew and I felt like I had to have that deck, this deck. And so I'm so very grateful that I have it now because it keeps on talking to me. We haven't had any, arguments so far because I'm always very accepting and believing that the message that these cards actually relay back to me is always very important. So this is the Savvy Soul Tarot, and it's definitely one of the decks that I use in my healing journey. So another concept that was expressed within the video by Tarot Stash was the concept of epiphany. So what is an epiphany? An epiphany is a revelation. It's a moment in which, you know, everything falls into the right place. Everything finally clicks. Everything finally makes sense. And it may come after years of confusion. And the bigger the epiphany, the stronger the motivation then is for us to move on. So one epiphany deck for me is definitely the Tarot of the Abyss, which is by Anna Torian. Anna Torian is very famous because she is the illustrator of the Born and Earth Flesh Tarot, but she's also been illustrating the Le Tarot Arthurien by Claude Duval, and she's also released quite recently the Tarot of Echoes which will eventually go mass market, from what I understand, in the near future, or perhaps in a year or two. This is a mass market deck. This is published by US Games. It's from 2021. It's one of the decks that really made my year 2021 acceptable. It was during the pandemic. I was going through a really hard time because my dad has passed away due to COVID. I had not been allowed to leave Australia in order to attend his funeral, which was back in Italy. And so it was very, very difficult for me to practice acceptance. It was very, very hard. And I felt like I was rightfully rejecting that. You understand, sometimes when you're wounded, you also kind of wallow in that feeling, and you feel rightful in rejecting any kind of possibility to heal because you're still outraged, and that's perfectly human. It is perfectly acceptable. And remember, no judgment. This is a no judgment zone. This is a bias-free zone. And I have been going through that for quite some time, I have to say. But eventually, I also understood that that feeling was actually weighing me down. And so I started accepting that the worst had happened and I had to move on. So that epiphany came to me thanks to many decks, not just this one, but this one has a very specific card. And I did not prepare it, so I may have to go through the whole deck again. By the way, I also love the fact that Anna has given us the possibility to use alternative cards for the 10 of Swords and the 3 of Swords. And since I read numerologically, this was very much appreciated. So the 8 of Cups is also another card that represents a kind of a smaller scale epiphany for me, but the fact that this character is so decisive in leaving behind what's broken, it's absolutely wonderful. And this is a card that actually reminded my Starlight members when we're doing this kind of healing step-by-step work all together, because this is the feeling of leaving something that is broken behind. The Star card is another card that I really, really like. There's so many cards that I think Anna has taken the right point of view, because it's not just about, let's say, resonating with your reader or with the collectors. It's also the property and the possibility of being of presenting a good opportunity to read a card with an additional layer of knowledge. So I really am grateful to any tarot decks that gives me the possibility to do just that. So look at the cards, understanding that this is the 4 of Cups, but also giving me an additional layer of knowledge or a different perspective on the card itself to be able the next time to make the message resonate even more for a person that I'm reading. The 5 of Cups is really strong as well. The 7 of Swords is very, very powerful, because there is this sense of looking towards the light, but being ourselves in the shadow. And this character is actually facing the situation that he's actually gotten away from. The 5 of Wands. So the card that I am talking about is the Hanged One. The Hangman card, which is obviously, now that I'm looking for it, because of Murphy's Law, I'll never find it. It will be definitely at the end of the deck. And I kid you not, it's actually at the end. It is the last card. I did not plan it. I promise you, I did not do it on purpose. It wasn't planned at all. So let me just zoom in a bit. This is an incredibly powerful card, but it's kind of difficult. If you're not familiar with this deck, it's kind of difficult to understand when looking at it, because, okay, we see, let's describe it first, okay? Show, don't tell. We've got the title with the Hanged One at the bottom. Then we see something that may look like the sky with clouds. We see also a couple of birds, but they look upside down. And then the further up in the card we go, we actually see what looks like distant plane. We look at what looks like a house, but it's upside down. And then we gradually understand, as I said, if we've never seen this card before, we understand that everything is indeed upside down. And the reason why everything is upside down is because Anna, when drawing this particular card, she has taken the point of view of the person who's hanging upside down. So we are the hanged one. We are the hanged man, woman. We have the perspective of the person that had to sacrifice a straight view of life and has accepted the fact that for now, things need to be looked at in a different way. This is an epiphany. This is an incredible epiphany, but it's also the epiphany by default, I reckon. It's the card that tells us that the more we insist on looking at things the same way over and over again, the least we will see. We will get to the point in which we are completely unaware of what we're standing in front of. In order to see something new, after we looked at the same scenery a million times, we actually need to take on a different perspective. And it might be hard, it might be painful, it may be triggering, but we have to do it. We need to step into the shoes of the hanged one. Only then we will be able to see things in a different way, and perhaps, if we are receptive enough, we'll be able to have this epiphany. This is a really powerful card, and it's a fantastic deck. And I just wanted to talk about another deck because, so let me just zoom out. This is the Creative Consciousness Healing Oracle deck. It's got 44 cards. It's by Johanna Wright. It's published by, I actually don't know. Oh, Andrews McNeil, sorry. Andrews McNeil. So this is a deck that was in my wish list for a while and I just couldn't bring myself to buy it. And then I saw Annette from a Project Refine Live talking about this and doing some pairings like she does, really, really gorgeous. And that convinced me because I immediately understood how powerful this deck is. One of my problems was that it is a larger kind of oracle deck. So not just an oracle deck, which is generally already larger than a standard tarot size, but it's actually a large oracle deck. So it's kind of difficult for me to handle this deck, but then again, I don't necessarily use it for divination. So I'm kind of happy to be able to, shuffle it this way, and that's absolutely fine. I can still do it. Or, for example, just looking at the cards and absorbing the meaning of the cards and the messages that we can see. So let's have a look first. We see purple diamond manifest in your dreams. Composting, decomposing energetic cords. How strong is that? How powerful is that? This is powerful for letting go. Body connection, reclaiming the power of your body. Acceptance. Light cleanse, clearing stuck energy. Kintsugi, being put back together. Wild energy, focusing your creative power. Ice boundary, emergency, energetic boundary. Hot and cold, resetting your nervous system. This is incredibly powerful. It's a very powerful exercise, but let me tell you, hot and cold, actually exposing ourselves to different temperatures is very beneficial to the nervous system. Whether it's a cold shower or a sauna, it is very, very powerful. And it's very accessible. Belonging, healing in community, moon belly. Look at this card. How beautiful is this card? Healing your gut. And how important is that? It's one of the most important things. The way we nourish ourselves tells us a lot on whether we are serious or not about healing ourselves. Let me tell you, if we don't eat healthy food, but it's not just about eating, it's also because healing the gut, you can also go for a walk, for example, do some exercises, meditation, etc. So if you can be doing a lot of work, you can do a lot of meditation, but if you still eat food that is actually unhealthy, it means that you're not serious about getting better. You're not serious about healing. It needs to start with the moon belly, so healing your gut. It's extremely important. Moon path, taking the next right step. Moon pebbles, challenge yourself with compassion. This sounds like a contradiction in terms. How can you be compassionate when you're actually challenging yourself? And yet, as hard as it sounds, we need to do it. We need to understand that showing compassion to ourselves doesn't necessarily mean indulgence. Sometimes it does, of course, but you can be compassionate while challenging yourself. It means that you're looking at what you've done without judging it. Bountiful healing and scarcity mindset. Even this one is just absolutely wonderful. We don't need to be rich to live a rich life. Grounding, rooting in the power of your purpose. Moon shroom, which is something that when I saw this card, I actually thought it was kind of whimsical. Moon and mushroom, moon shroom, healing all brain patterns. And then I was frozen because when I read the sentence here, I made the association, better late than never. And that really froze me because it is a very emotional card. Healing all the brain patterns is the goal. You could just learn this. If you just learn to heal all brain patterns, you have healed completely. Ironically, though, it is the most difficult thing to do. So when we talk about all the brain patterns, we talk about behaviors that we keep on repeating because circumstances around us remind us or they trigger us about the wound that was inflicted upon ourselves when we were a child and constituted a trauma. So we are in constant alert, and that's the time in which we react to things with our own 5-year-old eyes, not with our adult eyes. So that when we learn how to heal these old brain patterns, that is a giant leap forward, let me tell you. Not that easy though. Breathe, healing with your breath, it's very important as well. Nourish, of course. Rainbow boundary, protecting your true self. Don't be scared of pushing toxicity away. It sounds almost as if it were obvious, but sometimes we're not that good in recognizing a toxic environment because we're just so deep inside it. We're so chained to that we don't necessarily see it as a toxic environment. We just call it life, or we call it office work, or relationship in some cases. Simplify, clearing away what you don't need. So I know that a few years ago, we all talked about Marie Kondo, and she was like, making this kind of cleansing and clearing of your working space, your living space, something a bit of a trend. And I remember people almost kind of joking and saying, should I keep it or not? Well, does it bring you joy? And I remember, out of the joke, obviously, I don't mean to make it whimsical, but it does remind me of those years. And now I think that we went from one excess to the other. So minimalism is sometimes an art, and it's not easy to achieve, let me tell you. And my own example, I tend to be a minimalist, not for decks. Sorry, I will never be. It's impossible for me to actually sustain and convince anyone that I am a minimalist when it comes to tarot and oracle decks. But when it comes to everything else, I am actually a minimalist. I tend to try and make as much room as possible and just go through things and ask myself whether I need them or not. I don't ask myself whether they bring me joy, but I do ask myself if I need them. I live with my husband, and my husband is on the opposite side of the spectrum. So he will keep everything. He will just keep everything. We have, and that's very painful for me, as you can imagine, but we have newspapers from 3 months ago. And he's not keeping them because perhaps there's something very interesting in that particular newspaper. It just keeps them. And so, as you can imagine, it is a constant struggle, I have to say, but on the good side, because we are both aware of each other and we both choose to live together. And so I give in a little bit on my need to clear everything up, and he gives in a little bit on his need to actually collect everything. So it is a balance. We found our balance, and we're very blessed that we did. It took a lot of work. I would just say it didn't come naturally, but then again, nothing important ever does. Forgiveness, forgiving yourself at the cellular level. How wonderful is this? This talks about DNA. So I've been doing a lot of work with a oracle deck. It's a French oracle deck. It's called Anka. And one of the cards, this is for healing, and I'm using it also with my Starlight members. So when we look at some cards that talk about generational guilt is, believe it or not, is very powerful and very strong and very felt, especially by the younger generations. And it's something that is really crippling people with anxiety lately. And it's something that is extremely important to be tackled and healed because, it's one of those things that you think, okay, I carry the guilt of my ancestors with me. Okay, but let's stop for a second and let's understand that we, even though, yes, indeed, we truly are the product of our ancestors, but we also have our own oneness, consciousness, awareness, and mindfulness. And so that's a way in which we need to look at this cellular level, DNA level sense of guilt, because we need to move on from that. We need to acknowledge that, but we also need to move on from that because that will forge, that will create finally that generation that will be able to leave aside the sense of guilt and move on and build something better. If we wallow on the sense of guilt, we are incapacitated by our own anxiety. We cannot move forward. Life is movement. So we need to start by healing that at the cellular level. Pink fruit, realizing your dreams. Boundary cloak, gentle, loving protection, but still a protection. Pink lion, protecting little you. That is such a wonderful card to embody that sense of protection of the inner child. Schedule, creating a relationship with time, very important. Self-soothing. Self-soothing is actually a term used in psychology. So when, for example, we talk about mature adults, it's a term that I really hate, but it's just that there's a want of a better word, so let's take it for granted. We're supposed to be able to self-soothe. So if something bad happens, self-soothing is when you have control over your emotions and you actually reach the state in which you're still on alert, because if something has happened, actually you need to be on alert. Your nervous system is flagging all sorts of alarms, so you need to be on alert, but your reaction is constructive and not distracting. So you need to self-soothe that sense of panic in order to be able to reach that level of constructive reactions. Self-trust, building safety with yourself. Clarity, seeing and feeling the truth. This is a wonderful deck. It's a mass market deck. It's very affordable. I highly recommend it. Again, I think it's a very important tool in your own healing journey. And then we have an honorable mention, because I was going through this deck and I was thinking to myself, there's something missing. And I think that not everyone likes this deck. So again, trigger warning, it's a Doreen Virtue deck. And it's the Guardian Angel. I don't want to talk about what happened in specific about Doreen Virtue. And the reason why I'm showing this deck is specifically because I believe this deck is the ultimate hug deck. But it's also the Consolation deck. So if you're not familiar with this deck, and by the way, I think it has been, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it has been reprinted with just Radley Valentine's name. I could be wrong. Apologies if I'm wrong. This is a very old version. As you can see, it's falling apart, the box. I mean, I really have to do something about it because I don't want to break it. But in any case, so it's a very old deck. I actually got it that was already secondhand and it was really kind of falling apart, but I didn't mind because I really wanted to check this deck out. And so this deck is really not my aesthetic. So I just wanted to, put that out as a warning. Really not my aesthetic. I tend not to even look at the images sometimes. It's just that when you read the sentences at the bottom of the card, you kind of are reminded to look at the images because there are references. But this is a deck that even your let's say most negative, and I don't like to say negative, but for oversimplification, even the most negative card, which we could say is, for example, the Three of Swords, or the Ten of Swords, or the Five of Swords, even those cards, or the Nine of Swords, even those cards, they're actually still consoling, they're healing. They are formulated in such a way that you feel like there's still this sense of being embraced by warmness and kindness and compassion. And this is the Three of Thought. So thought is the renaming of the Suit of Sword. And let me just quickly read it for you. So loving angels surround you to heal and comfort you. The sadness you feel will fade away in time, and then you'll be able to see clearly how important this situation has been for your spiritual growth. Take the time you need to forgive yourself and others so that you can embrace the future with joy. I mean, obviously, it's a bit of a spin to the card. I completely understand that. And in many, many cases, I've heard a lot of comments of people saying that it's a cheating deck because the Three of Swords should not be read this way. There's yes and no to that when it comes to my interpretation. For example, the Three of Swords, when it's reversed, could be read in a sort of a indication of something good to come. And there's other cards that I do read in a positive way when they are reversed. For example, all of the fives tend to be positive in their reverse meaning, although I have at least 5 different ways to read reversal, so that's just one of the ways. But I just wanted to read this to give you an example of how you can actually look at the card and still find a way to feel positive about the card itself. So this is one of those decks that to me is the equivalent of saying, hey, it's going to be okay. Listen, it's going to be okay. And believe it or not, sometimes we actually need to hear it. Sometimes that 5-year-old that went through something horrible and that was exposed to horrible events and that was traumatized needs to hear it, even though we don't know if it is indeed going to be okay or not. We need to know that hope is always there. It's always reachable. It's always accessible. We need someone else that tells us, even if they themselves are worried about something, you need to console another person when they feel at their lowest. I don't mean to say that you need to lie. This is a very tricky thing, and I will never advocate for lies. However, there is a way to say that things are going to be okay. There is a movie, and it's got a really long title. Let me see if I can remember all of it. So, well, the short title is The Marigold Hotel. And I think it's got like a subtitle, which is really, really long, For the Old and the Beautiful and something like that. So it's a movie from perhaps 15 years ago. I don't remember. It's with Dev Patel. And it pictures a group of old friends, and they all, well, they don't all know each other. Some of them know each other, but they found themselves in an airport in Delhi in India. They are stranded, but they're there because they're actually looking to retire in a retirement village or a retirement home. And, because there's this commercial that they watched on TV, and they saw this about this Marigold Hotel that was promising, really good things for whomever wanted to retire there. And so they actually found themselves all looking to go to this place. And obviously there's lots and lots of twists and turns, and there's lots of things happening, and it's actually a very enjoyable movie. But what I do remember, and the reason why I actually mentioned this movie, is that Dev Patel, who's the hotel, not the owner, but maybe the manager, always repeats this: all will be okay at the end. And if it's not okay, then it's not the end. And this was one of the most powerful sentences of that movie, and of, I would say, many other movies as well, because there is a sense of acceptance. There is a sense of accepting that perhaps things are not okay right now. Because by saying if they're not okay, then it's not the end. But it still gives you hope. So it recognizes and it accepts that right now, perhaps, we are in pain. However, it also tells us that hope is always there and things will be all right at the end. I just wanted to leave you with this because it's a really powerful message and I strongly believe in it. And if you want to join my membership program, my Starlight or my Sunlight, you'll be more than welcome. It is a growing and getting stronger community by the day. We're having a lot of fun as well. We're doing a course, a professional reading course. We're doing the deck and walk together. We're doing a down the rabbit hole. So we're doing a deck study. And with my Starlight members in specific, I'm actually doing this program of healing and using tarot and meditation and introspecting journaling in order to reach that level of acceptance of ourselves, but also that necessary self-confidence to break free of the cage we feel that we're living in. Now, thanks so much for being with me till the end of this video. More to come. Have a great day.